Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well. Today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which will see Despicable Me 4 once again take the top spot, with Inside Out 2 projected to take that number 2 spot once again. Both films doing incredibly well. According to Box Office Theory, a 46% drop is projected for Despicable Me 4's second weekend, which is very, very strong. Inside Out 2, now having been out for about 4 or 5 weeks, also holding strong as well down the line, which is why I'm projecting right now that Inside Out 2 will definitely be at least the second highest grossing film of this year, because I still firmly believe that Deadpool and Wolverine will not only be breaking records for rated R films, but also will be the biggest grossing film of this year, if, of course, those pre-sale numbers are any indication of potential success. Of course, the film has to actually come out. We actually have to know what the actual weekend opening estimates are going to be, because as of right now, it is purely conjecture, purely projection based off of pre-sales. And I've said consistently throughout the many years of this channel, pre-sales are a bit of fool's gold because they do not guarantee necessarily any actual walk-up numbers. And walk-up numbers ultimately can make or break a movie, and can ultimately decide and determine whether a film has a massive opening weekend or whether it becomes remembered as a box office flop. As a great example of this I always bring up is Solo, a Star Wars story, which had, again, a lot of buzz about pre-sales and then ended up being one of the biggest box office disappointments in the history of Disney and in the history of Star Wars. We also have a couple new films coming out on more of the independent side of things. Longlegs from Neon, absolutely an independent production company. This film is expected to take the number 3 spot this weekend, and instead of getting into the top 4, Top 5 is expected for Fly Me to the Moon, which is a new film from Apple and Sony Pictures. And this film costing $100 million, at least as of the recording of this video. Yeah, let's just say $11.1 million is being spun as some kind of win, as some kind of victory, as somehow a strong showing for a smaller film, except for the fact that it cost $100 million, which means ultimately, yeah, this film probably won't be making its money back theatrically either. We'll go into all of these films, though, and all of this other information that you need to know going into the weekend. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light that fire button over, and honestly smash the rumble button as well. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, and make sure you hit that bell. That way you know every time your video or live stream goes live on the channel. So again, Despicable Me 4, this is of course coming from Box Office Theory, and this is being projected to be the number 1 film, dropping 46%, 34% for Inside Out 2, but we all know this is just one site's interpretation. If you go to Box Office Pro, right now they are projecting the film to make somewhere between $32 and $38 million. That is their running projection, so you can see a little bit of a higher projection being given by Box Office Theory versus that of Box Office Pro. And if we go over to Deadline, as of the last time they updated his article, good old Tony at Deadline said that he thought the film was going to get around $33 million in its second weekend. And so right now we're looking at a range of around probably $33 to $40 million likely second weekend, which means we're going to probably see somewhere between 46% and maybe the mid to high 50% drop in that second weekend. If I had to make any guesses, I would say Box Office Theory might be on the better side of this. We'll have a much better idea once we get some Friday numbers, and of course those Saturday numbers coming in. That's when they make the official projections for the actual weekends themselves on Sunday, and then the actuals being adjusted by Monday or Tuesday. But either way, Despicable Me 4 is definitely going to be coming in that number 1 spot very easily. But remember, even though this might be like, oh, look, it's making twice as much as Inside Out 2, remember, Inside Out 2 over 3 days had a vastly higher box office domestically than Despicable Me 4. This is the reason why I do think the chances of Despicable Me 4 getting to $1 billion are actually quite high. I think we'll probably get a better idea of that this weekend. Basically, the closer that the film gets to $500 million by the end of this weekend, the higher that chance is ultimately going to get that is going to happen, because it is not yet released in several foreign markets. We're going to be starting to get some numbers from some major markets that it is not yet released in, that has started to release in over the last couple of days and going into this weekend. And of course, we know that both in the case of Despicable Me 4 and in Inside Out 2, we also know that the releases in Japan for both films are delayed made as well. And so both of them will receive a little bit of a bump from that country. But ultimately, because of such a huge head start, a huge advantage, and also because of how much better it is just doing on paper, Inside Out 2 is definitely going to win the battle between those two films. Still, are thinking right now we're going to have these two films be 2 out of the $3 billion films that we're likely to see this year. And we've talked about this on stream previously about why I think we're probably going to see another $1 billion film in Deadpool and Wolverine. Quiet Place Day 1 is still hanging around as well, dropping 38%. So this is a film, as I mentioned, is well on its way to making its money back, well on its way to making profits. So kudos to Paramount for being able to pull that off. Bad Boys Ride or Die finally got to its profitability point as well, so it's just adding on to its profits at this point. And big news is Horizon: An American Saga dropping another 42% after it had dropped about 50% last weekend. And the big news, of course, with that one is the fact that the second film, Chapter 2, I've talked about this on previous videos. Yeah, this was supposed to be released in August, and because of how poorly this film has done at the box office, it has been delayed, and I believe it's been delayed it's been delayed indefinitely. It says here, Chapter 2 is no longer coming out on August 16th. The news comes following the misfire of Chapter 1 over the July 4th box office frame. And that's actually a good way of wording it, simply because, so I'm going to give kudos to Tony there, because if this movie can't do well over a 4th of July holiday frame, you can try to make the excuses about, the runtime and, the competition at the box office, right? It just got lost in the noise. No, ultimately, it's the execution of the film. The film is just not that good of a movie. And look, it's got great actors in it. There's some very interesting things. Cinematography is beautiful. But when the story itself is very convoluted and very confusing, and you have all the time in the world to be telling the story and you still can't do it, making it shorter would have probably just made it that much more confusing. As everyone has said, probably would have worked better as a series, right? As a miniseries on HBO or a miniseries on Netflix or one of those streaming services, Paramount Plus, I guess you could say. But ultimately, you would also have need to have had a better writer to better present these characters and not have things be as convoluted as they were. It says, given the movie's 50-plus leaning audience and how they're slow to come to the cinemas, filmmakers wanted to give that audience time to find the first movie, whether that be in home or in theaters. Chapter 1 will hit digital on July 16th. It will continue to run in theaters. Something tells me that that is not going to be enough to make up for it. As I've mentioned previously, the film right now is projected to lose probably about $50 million at the box office, and if Chapter 2 follows in those same footsteps, that would mean about $100 million in losses for these first two films, which were filmed around the same time, which were essentially paid for by $100 million together. Obviously, two films split means $50 million for each. And so that means that we are dealing with a situation where the chances of Chapter 2 coming out on streaming probably going to be a little bit higher now at this point in time, because I don't think they're going to see those numbers. There's just been no indication that there is a lot of interest in this film or in this series. And I know there's some people out there that enjoyed the film, that thought it was fine, that are looking forward to the next ones. But ultimately, as I mentioned, the box office is making it very clear. And I also think Critical Drinker just came out recently with a fantastic review of this movie, and he really hit all of those points that I've been trying to get across, and even more that I was not able to articulate, because of course Critical Drinker can do things in such a way that is always going to be so much better than I, and so much better than most other people. And I think that he hits the nail on the head about why this film just isn't doing well, and it ultimately comes down to the story just not being that compelling. But anyway, that's the reason why we're seeing this film, drop all the way down on the charting here, right? $3.1 million. This film is just getting to $27.7 million domestically, not doing much of anything else anywhere else in the world. Maxine from A24 dropping 69% in its second weekend. This is kind of not a surprise from an A24 film that's not gotten the best reviews. Apparently people have said it's like the weakest in the franchise of films that they've done with this character played by Mia Goth, but being not a fan of the franchise myself, I cannot say whether or not it is good or not. And then Sound of Hope, which I think is phenomenal, but unfortunately I think it has a too long of a title, and also, and this is going to be somewhat controversial, I think made a mistake when they decided to team up with the Daily Wire, because this has actually now had an impact on the actual film itself. There are now reports coming out that Letitia Wright, who was one of the producers on the film, she of course is connected to the Black Panther series, to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? And it's when I saw her name, I was actually very happy, because I thought, wow, this is a beautiful story that needs to be told. The problem when you do any dealings with Daily Wire is that you politicize yourself, whether you want to or not. okay? And so this is not me making a statement about the politics of Daily Wire or anything else, but if you're going to team up with them, you are literally just going to be politicizing your content, even though the film has no politicization in it whatsoever. Again, the film was produced by Letitia Wright. Something tells me she's not really much of a conservative person, especially since she's now made comments criticizing this fact, saying she had no choice in the matter and that she did not like this choice that had been made. And again, this is something where at least I can make sense of it from both sides. One, I think it's silly for us to try to politicize something when in reality it's, oh, there's two companies working together, and the film itself, the message does not change because it was made before Daily Wire got involved. They had no creative input into the film. They were just trying to help the film get reached by more people, right? So they were just saying, hey, we can put some money in, we can get a little bit of money back from this too by helping to distribute the film, by helping to try to get more eyeballs on the film. But ultimately, they have no actual creative control of the project. And so I think that it's a bad move though in the long run, because it's going to push some people away, and it might also be explaining why the box office is as low for this film compared to some other releases. Because had they just made this film called Sound of Hope, right, just let that be the actual title, just like with Sound of Freedom, and let just the audience be the ones that put the message out there, that get that grassroots going, I think it would have made a little bit more, maybe not a whole lot, because again, important message here, dealing with the importance of why there are so many kids in our foster care system in trying to get adopted, needing good families to adopt them. That's a beautiful story to tell. Obviously, not nearly as powerful as as basically exposing the abuse of children as Sound of Freedom did. But I think that this is one of the many reasons as to why this film is not doing well. It makes me sad because I think it's a very, very good film. Going to the rest of what Box Office Pro has said, you can see right here, they think at $32 to $38 million for Despicable Me Part 4. They think Inside Out 2 is going to take the number 2 spot, 18 to 22 million. It's about what we saw on Box Office Theory as well. The wild card, it says here, is Long Legs, which they're projecting to get 15 to 20. So they actually think that Long Legs could end up taking that number 3 spot. And we have, of course, here another what they call wild card, Fly Me to Moon. I just don't think a lot of people are going to be seeing this movie, personally, because as we all know, when it comes to the stars of a show or stars of a movie, that does not drive a lot of people to the cinema. There's still this false perception that stars drive people out. But we know that this is not the case. If this was the case, there's so many movies because of the stars in them that would have made money or should have made money. But this is not actually the case. It says that it's originally intended to go straight to Apple TV Plus. The $100 million budgeted rom-com tested well enough to warrant a theatrical bout. And I think that that is ultimately going to be a very bad decision on their parts, because that means that they now had to spend probably $50 to $100 million on marketing for a film, because that's your standard marketing cost. About you take the budget, multiply it by 1.5, that gets you your total cost. So a total cost of about $150 million, maybe high as $200 million, because depending on how much money they actually spent on that. And if you're only making $11 million projected, upwards of $20 million domestically, right? Upwards of $17 million, I should say, domestically. Yeah, that's a very, very far way to go to actually get to the point, right? Just because you have Channing Tatum and Scarlett Johansson in it, it says, seems like a dream pairing. I don't remember a lot of people really wanting or clamoring for that. And it looks like this is just coming out of the Hollywood machine. Right? This doesn't seem like what you had last time when you had the film Anyone But You, right? Where it came across as a bit more of that authentic rom-com. Personally, I was not a big fan of it. I thought it was a little bit too raunchy for my taste, but still, don't deny the fact that the film did very well over that Valentine's Day frame, did very well over the course of its release, right? Even after that fact, and it was able to make money. It was able to make its profits. It was able to make its money back. This one just seems much more like a by-the-numbers corporate structure, and those are not going to be doing, I think, nearly as well. Also, I love whenever they mention Rotten Tomatoes critics scores. So that is that story there. As you can see, Fly Me to the Moon, they're saying here, it's like, man, they're going to give the underserved female moving audience to cinemas. It's like, look, this is not the kind of movie that I think they're going to come out for. And you might be able to argue Channing Tatum could bring people out there, but I'm sorry, this movie seems much more Scarlett Johansson-centric, and that is not going to drive, I think, the women out nearly as much. And again, that budget is going to ultimately be, I think, the death knell for that film. One other note I wanted to say before going into my chart, because we love charts here on OMB Reviews, is pointing out how they're saying Inside Out 2 is now the biggest, it's the highest grossing Pixar film ever worldwide with $1.25 billion. The problem, of course, being they don't adjust for inflation or take into account ticket prices. So yes, this is still impressive on paper. This is still very good on paper. But to say this is the biggest however, still not accurate. And so Nance, good old Nance over on Deadline, another fail from you. Going over to the charting of all the things that we love here. As you can see, Fly Me to the Moon does not have any numbers yet, so that's the reason why those will fill in as we get closer to it. As of right now, Despicable Me 4, as of the recording of this video, so we have not, I don't believe we've gotten the updates yet for yesterday, for Wednesday. So let me go ahead and see if I can update this in real time to see. It looks like, okay, maybe we have. So as you can see, $258 million worldwide is where we currently stand with this movie. So we're well on the way for the film to be able to probably easily cross $350 million this weekend. And I think probably somewhere between 400 and 500 million is where this film will be worldwide by the end of the weekend. And I think that as long as it gets even closer, ever closer to 500 million, is able to do so by the end of this weekend, it will be in a good position to possibly hit $1 billion. The great thing about this movie, though, is that it doesn't need to hit $1 billion to break even. As you can see, even according to my RCC method, right? And if you want more on the RCC method, check out my article on geeksandgamers.com where I talk about that very fact. I have box office breakdowns every weekend over there amid tons of other box office news there. So check me out over there, OMB Reviews. As you can see, it's only right now at $24 million in the red. So my other projection is not only is the film going to be somewhere between $400 and $500 million worldwide by the end of this weekend, you're also likely going to see the film actually in the positive category. So I think it's going to break even and start to make profit by the end of this weekend. And we're already seeing, again, a little bit of a slower trudge towards these numbers versus that of Inside Out 2. The thing with Inside Out 2, remember, it cost another $100 million more for Inside Out 2 than it did for Despicable Me 4, right? Despicable Me 4 only cost about $100 million to make, still more than what the initial projection was, but also still not too much for it to actually need to make that much money to break even in comparison. And yet, even though it costs $100 million more, because of how much more slowly it's making money versus what Inside Out 2 did, that's the reason why we are seeing, I think, this film not get to its break-even point nearly as fast, but also why I think that if the film is going to hit $1 billion, it's not going to be by week 3, like we saw in the case of Inside Out 2. It's probably not even going to be by week 4, because I think that this film is probably a good 2 to 3 weeks behind where we see Inside Out 2 going instead, right? Inside Out 2 now $1.25 billion. That means $276 million in net profit, right? Using that RCC method, using the most realistic data that we have about how much a studio gets from the domestic, how much the studio gets from the international, how much they get from China, right? And this film has absolutely released in China, $35 million in China, right? Where it gets pennies on the dollar, but also I will call out any film that gets released in China because you're doing dealings with communists and it's just funding the Communist Party over there. But I digress. $1.2 million is still nothing to nothing to cry about, right? Because that's very, very impressive. Remember, this film had $724 million by the end of its second weekend. That's just not looking like that's going to be the case here for Despicable Me Part 4. So if I had to guess where the film likely will be, let's see if we can find a comparison. Godzilla X Kong was at 361. I think it could possibly beat that. Dune Part 2 is at 367. I think it could possibly beat that as well. But just using maybe those films as comparisons, right? Using the final results of Dune and Godzilla. In the case of Dune, that film ended at $710 million by the end of its run. And then ending off with Godzilla X Kong, that film ended at $569 million by the end of its run. Okay, so those films, very similar numbers or somewhat close numbers there in the second weekend, and also very different final results. So if indeed Despicable Me 4 comes in, as I'm projecting, higher than those two films' second weekend numbers, but still about probably 200 million or so less than where Inside Out 2 was, that's again why I'm projecting it to be probably 2 weeks or so, 2 to 3 weeks behind Inside Out 2, if it's going to have that chance of getting $1 billion or getting close to $1 billion. But again, profit well on its way for that movie. Horizon, well on its way to losing money, right? It's still $45 million in the red at this point in time. So this film not likely going to be making its 61 million in the red. So likely going to end around 50 million, especially since it's going onto streaming in just just a few more, just a few more days, really less than a week at this point. So that's probably going to impact it as well. The Bike Riders, as I'd mentioned, phenomenal movie. Everyone should go see it. I think it's now available on VOD or very close to being on VOD, and so I recommend watching it. Can't wait for the physical media copy of that film to come out. Quiet Place Day One, I believe, also has a VOD release date. If it's not there already, it will be soon. This film also well on its way to breaking even. I think this film and Despicable Me 4 will be two films that will flip into the black and be to their break even and start to add to their profitability by the end of this weekend. Sound of Hope has a little bit more further of a ride there, right? It doesn't have the biggest budget in the world, but still it needs to make at least some money. So right now it's projected to, I think, end somewhere around 10 to 15 million maybe by the end of this weekend. And so it'll get closer to that break even. I don't know if it'll be enough though for this film to actually hit its official break even at this point. But those are the numbers as they stand right now. So what are y'all's thoughts? Do you think that we're going to see Despicable Me 4 come in at that stronger $40.8 million, or the weaker projections coming from Box Office Pro and the likes of Deadline, where they're thinking the film will probably instead end around $32 to $38 million? Please let me know your thoughts about that as well. It goes on to talk about the second weekend drops for some of the other films in the franchise, saying there was a 57% drop, 57, 48, 54, 42. These are the various drop-offs in that case, and so we're probably going to see something in that range, right? You actually see that in the comparison, right? According to Despicable Me 4's numbers on Box Office Theory, 46%. According to their numbers, they're probably leaning more towards that 55 to 60% drop in the end of the second weekend. And then also somewhere in the middle of that is obviously what Tony is saying in his article about the $33 million. And so what do you think it's going to be? Also, how quickly do you think Despicable Me 4 is going to get to $1 billion? Do you think it's going to get to $1 billion? I know some have speculated that it won't, but as I mentioned, the film is still tracking very, very well, very, very strongly, and it still has not yet released in several international countries, and we're going to start to get numbers from those countries this weekend, which is why I think it's going to get $400 to $500 million when those numbers finally update. But we'll have to wait and see. We'll come back here on Sunday for the box office breakdown, where we look at that and talk about this and so much more. Before we get any further, please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, light up that fire button on Odyssey, smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Also, if you are going to be in Knoxville this weekend, there is a Comic-Con event in Knoxville, and I will be up there, at least for a little part of it. I know that Michelle and Natalie from Force of Light are going to be up there. Valiant Renegade is going to be up there. I'm trying to think. I think Drunk 3PO is going to be up there because Gina Carano is going to be, I believe, at that Comic-Con as well. So, and there's going to be probably a plethora of other people up there too. So if you are going to be there, let me know in the comment section too, so that way we can try to meet up and I can try to be on the lookout for everybody and make sure I have y'all's usernames in my mind so I can connect the dots on some of those things. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Thursday, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Patreon, Subscribe Star, Locals, and YouTube members who are at the Chosen of Valhalla level. Starting off with my Patreon supporters, Father Luca Illich, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel, which is Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name. To my Subscribe Star Chosen members, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, and also the K-Man, check him out at xtheboundaries.co, and a shout out also to my one Chosen of Valhalla YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Thank you again for being so much of a huge supporter of the channel. And to every one of my chosen members, if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, or if you want access to things like giveaways of Blu-rays, 4Ks, etc., and access to an exclusive podcast bonus material for members, check out the links in the video description below for all of those details. You guys are amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed month of the Sacred Heart, and as always, God bless.